So anyway, let me just briefly introduce what we're going to do today. It's very, very simple, and it's going to be participatory, so you can't sit in the back row here on this one. We have Roy Horan, who is a professor of creativity, and we actually just got to know him recently at the Indodo conference. He led off our student-led conference here. He did some really interesting things. And he not only does a lot with creativity and many other things, but he also has been kind of a long time kind of meditation guy too. And so when we were bringing Cynthia, this is Cynthia Bourgeault, when we decided to bring her over, it just seemed like such a natural to actually get them together. And that just kind of spawned this idea that we wanted to bring them together for a conversation around creativity and the spiritual life. And if we had to pick a word that relates to either one of them, I would say this is creativity and this is spirituality. But I think if you know either of them, you know that those words really cross. And that I think both have a lot to say. I think they've written, both of them have written about creativity and spirituality in ways that really, I think, connect very well. So they don't really know each other. We just kind of put them together here in a shotgun way.
You're the right barrel, I'm the left barrel. Nice to meet you.
You're the left brain, I'm the right brain.
All right, let's go for it.
So we're gonna see what happens here, and so we thought it's a very simple format, and we thought we'd ask Roy to start off with a kind of a very simple creativity exercise and see what comes to that, and then Cynthia, you're going to close us at the end of our session with a little bit of closing and some comments in between, and hopefully this will be very participatory. So Roy, why don't you take it away?
Well, first of all, thank you for the introduction, Marty. I'd like to thank you and Richard and Bill for the opportunity to be here. And I've only been here a few times, but it's always been very enjoyable. And so anyway, let's start. Want to start off with a very simple exercise. And I'd like you just to relax, take a deep breath in, and exhale long. Another deep breath in, just let it out. Okay, what I'd like you to do, now that you're a little bit relaxed, is to ask a question of yourself. The question is, what is the source of my creativity? Now, I don't want you, while you're doing this, to think about an answer. Don't try to solve this problem. Just repeat the question over and over again in your mind. And as you repeat the question over and over in your mind, allow it to sink deeply into yourself, into this area of silence that we all have. So you're repeating, what is the source of my creativity, deeper and deeper. And as that happens, you may have thoughts, emotions, and sensations arising. Just take note of them and let them go. Now during this process, you may have some thoughts, emotions, or sensations that are a little bit unusual, or they're persistent. Just take note of those, and then let them go. And we'll continue after that. So just work with this and just see what comes up as you ask yourself this question. What is the source of my creativity? We'll do this for about 2 minutes. Okay. Bring your attention back. So, would anybody like to share anything that might have popped up in their head during this? Could be anything. Could be a sensation, could be an unusual thought. It seems to have no relationship with the question whatsoever.
For me, I found it really hard to not stop associating creativity with what I do, like with my painting practice. So every time I kept saying that question, I kept thinking, oh, well, why do I create my paintings? But it was really hard to not think about, that question.
Okay. So when you were thinking about your paintings, was there any particular emotion associated with it? Or it's just work?
Well, it's enjoyment.
Okay. So your paintings, you receive a lot of enjoyment from paintings. Okay. Good. Anybody else?
I had a sensation in my left hand, left fingertips.
Okay, what kind of sensation?
I mean, just a tingling. It's like they're lighting up like a Christmas tree. I mean, just, I don't think that usually happens when I meditate. I mean, I've been meditating a lot since she's been here, and I don't remember any sensations, and like, I can still feel it.
Well, just to note that that's how Einstein used to determine whether he was getting close to an answer or not.
Ooh.
It was a tingling in his hand.
See, I like this guy.
So don't discount things like that. Anything else? It could be something innocuous. Doesn't have to be.
Certain word stuff coming up. One that came up more than a few times was gratitude.
Gratitude. Okay. Very good. Anything else?
What came up for me was silence, quiet.
Okay. Good. Any others? No, this is done for a very short period of time, only 2 minutes. Basically what you're doing is you're getting in contact with the unconscious or the subconscious mind. If you did this for a little bit longer, it would be, you'd have more opportunity to have insight. But if you're doing this with children or school kids, and sometimes they draw a blank, nothing. The best thing to do is give them a blank sheet of paper and tell them to doodle. And once they start doodling, then whatever is inside them will come out in the doodle. Anybody else?
For me, it was problem solving more like, I wasn't thinking art because I'm not a painter, but yeah, so I was just thinking creative. But that's more like work.
Well, what's the nature of problem solving?
Yeah.
What's a problem?
Right, exactly. Nothing, like something to figure out.
I think it was Edward de Bono that defined a problem as the difference between where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah, good. I like it.
Okay. Well, actually, we've done work with this and with quite a number of students and people, and you get all different types of results. Anything from silence to visions of Buddha to people in the shower, running outside, playing in a field with children, balloons rising into the sky, abstract mathematical equations, many, many, many different types of responses to this. And actually, the unconscious mind is extremely good at solving problems or coming up with answers and solutions, but a lot of times those answers don't make immediate sense to us. And if you look at all of these different things that come up from people when they're asking this particular question, I'd say they fall into two categories. One category is exceeding boundaries, going outside of boundaries. So for instance, if people see themselves early in the morning just getting out of bed, where the mind is very relaxed but very alert, and they feel that there are no boundaries, it's kind of a peaceful feeling, that's one. Detachment or silence is transcending a boundary. There are many, many of them. Playfulness is actually transcending a boundary and also creating boundaries. The interplay between vulnerability and control. But the other side of the equation, one is exceeding boundaries, the other is integrating. So for instance, people that experience love, family love, or experience this feeling of oneness that happens sometimes coming up from inside them, or joy, it's integration. It's pulling things together. So on one side you have exceeding boundaries, and the other side you have this integration. And I hope that sometime this afternoon, won't go into it right now, because I think Cynthia should speak, and that is we'll get into perhaps what's really happening in a human being, in the psychology and the brain, to look at these things, transcendence and integration. What does it really mean in terms of spirituality? All yours.
thinking about my experiences, I was, where is the source of creativity? And that the immediate thing that popped into my head was God. Mm-hmm. And then what happened is it immediately began to turn into an arc. And I could feel this kind of circle going like this. And out of that circle popped a song, which will be familiar to some of you, although it's, I don't know, it's a good old Welsh hymn, the end of one that goes, "Thou of life the fountain art, freely let me drink of thee. Spring thou up within my heart, rise to all eternity." The last bit of the old hymn aberist with, but I think I'd probably just sort of ease my way into this by talking about what I call the last time I ever wrote a sermon.
Okay.
And I was for shortly after I was ordained as an Episcopal priest, I was at the campus at the University of Pennsylvania where I'd formerly been a grad student. And I was now on a ministry team that ministered to this highly academic parish. Most of the faculty at the University of Pennsylvania were right there. So we were a group of 4, and we only got to preach about once a month. So I thought, so everyone was, we got to be good, It's like you're defending your dissertation at Harvard. So I would literally start, I would put 40 hours into a 10-minute sermon. And look at the text and study. And one day I was really coming down the home stretch on this text, and I was in the office at our little campus ministry office at the edge. The University of Pennsylvania is on a kind of transitional campus between, the little bubble of academic safety and the kind of very dicey neighborhoods of West Philadelphia. So it's one of those. And in comes this guy, we always got a lot of street bums that come into the office, and this one's panhandling and wanting something and wanting a cup of, I'd give you a dime for a cup of coffee, but he seemed to be hanging out, and he was trying to angle a ride or something downtown. Finally said, gave him some money, get on your way, get out of here, went back to my text and looked at it, and it said, when did you see those that were hungry and fed them in need and clothed them prisoners and And I looked at it and said, oh my God, 40 hours writing this damn sermon that I could actually do in 5 minutes off the top of my head. And totally out of touch with, the human condition it was describing. And I said, something is really, really wrong with this picture. And I realized that what I had been using as the sources of my creativity was the totally wrong sources, that they were coming out of egoic approval and affirmation, a certain rigidity, a kind of competitiveness, wanting to be thought not just worthy, but the top of the top dog. And that I was spending, not only a grotesquely disproportionate amount of time on the task, but it was also desensitizing me and cutting me off from some recognition. So I said that whatever it is, the creativity is being blocked by that whole kind of egoic thing. And that basically started me on a path of, well, what happens if you can simply deepen connection and learn to be present in a deeper way? And so in the course of time, I became a student and then a teacher of centering prayer, which is, we've been working with that all weekend, where you basically, it's 20 minutes of meditation, where you drop, as thoughts come up, you let them go, and so you're basically dropping that subject-object configuration of your attention, and this kind of inner, diffuse, objectless awareness begins to grow up. And I found that in proportion to the amount of time that I was putting in centering prayer, the time of prep time I needed to respond to any sort of situation was just going way, way down. I could be, that there was a kind of learning to trust that the more I kind of hung out at that place in me for a regular time each day, the more I would be able to meet the circumstances that were right before me on my plate with assistance that would come. So that's been some of the practice I've been at, and I know a little bit more about the brain science of why that's so, but it's still basically layman's knowledge. But I do know, and I have been working in my own teaching at late and looking at meditation practice, not so much from just personal therapeutic, which is what a lot of people use it for, to reduce stress, increase mindfulness, but as a real direct connection with a kind of creativity which is your natural birthright, which flows through you. If you can just get around the inhibiting and censoring mechanisms that come in when egoic consciousness and how well am I doing begin to get into play. So over to you. That's and over to you. That's
Well, I totally agree with you in terms of creativity. A lot of the times, the way creativity is taught in school is, your children are approached with lateral thinking and all these different techniques, remote associations, learn how to mind map and so forth, but it doesn't really get to the core of what creativity is. We're all being creative right now, in this very moment. There's a lot of things happening in your mind. You're processing what I'm saying. You're processing how your body feels at this moment. You're processing sounds in the room. And somehow all of this is coming together in a creative act. And yes, we do get into patterns. We get into different types of patterns, and we rely on those patterns. You can call them ego, if you like. But creativity, it's happening in the moment. In order for something to come together, something else has to not be part of the picture. All right, so creativity, the interesting thing about creativity is in order to create, something has to be dissolved. And a pre-existing pattern, a thought, an idea, a particular product, a service, it has to be modified, it has to be sometimes even completely thrown out. But if you look at that in terms of products and services, what does that mean in terms of human beings? Is it possible for a human being to renew him or herself every second? Where the old you, it was a split second ago, is a new you right now, and to be aware of that. And for this to happen in creativity, surrender is very important. I did read your book on centering prayer, and found it wonderful. But this concept of surrender, letting go, is very, very important part of creativity. That's exceeding boundaries, transcending boundaries in the moment. But at the same time, something else happens in creativity, and that is things come together. So as you transcend boundaries, there's this type of unity that begins to occur where new ideas and associations come up. And this, I think, in spirituality can be taken to greater and greater levels. Cynthia is talking about God, her relationship with God. God, I guess, is the highest principle that a human being can conceive of or experience. And so it's a very unified experience. But at the same time, how do you get there? From my understanding of centering prayer, it's letting go of your thoughts, letting go of your sensations, letting go of your emotions, and you keep your focus on God. So in terms of creativity, there's a similar thing that can happen in the mind. And the greater levels of creativity, to reach the greater levels of creativity, you want to call it creative genius, the level of oneness has to be much, much greater. The sense of connectedness has to be much greater. And at the same time, also the sense of exceeding boundaries, getting outside of boundaries, the boundary of the ego, and so forth. Any comments on this? Yeah.
So maybe I could ask both of you, maybe both of you can talk about surrendering. Maybe you can say more about that. Why is surrender such an important role in the creative process. Because I think for us at HKS, I mean, so much of what I think we're trying to do with at least achievement, and sometimes that's a creative achievement, sometimes it's just learning the material or whatever. I think we think of ourselves as like bearing down to try to learn the material. But you know, what both of you are suggesting, I think, is that we actually need to not get uptight. We need to somehow let go. And I think our community is not very good at that. I think
it's not necessarily just your community. I think the whole planet.
Okay.
We all struggle with that, I think, at one degree or another.
With Cynthia's example, you know, that you spend 40 hours preparing a lesson for, just 10 minutes, and happens all the time, but isn't it that part of the process in which for example, Picasso, okay, you need to go through all, through this school of painting and see all the different styles and study that, and then finally realize, oh yes, I can have my own style. Isn't part of that process of, well, let me go and suffer this, and finally I realize that yes, I can do it by myself, and I can express all of it in another way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the places where I'm getting tripped up is the oxymoron implicit in my creativity, because it's exactly the my that fights against the creativity. That there's this stream, and some of the classic pictures that used to come, particularly from the Islamic mystical tradition, but that surrounding this world that we access with our linear mind and our conceptual ego, we call it the unconscious nowadays, but the great earlier mystical traditions called it the mundus imaginalis, a realm of, David Boehme calls it the implicate order nowadays, but that there is a field of luminous, ever-flowing creative possibility waiting to come into form. And that surrounds all of us in this planet like a huge placenta that we're all swimming around within. And that Jung was so brilliant in his picking out that in certain ways we could access it. He called it the collective unconscious, but even calling it unconscious, I think, puts a opposite value on it from how it's been known in sacred tradition, that it's an objective realm of a far higher and more coherent order that holds everything together, and that our heart, understood in that classic way as an organ of spiritual perception, not just as a beating pump and a source of personal feeling, is in spontaneous and holographic connection with this huge field. It's not playing hide and seek. It's not gosh, it's trying to get into form. And as we allow our heart to become transparent and open to that, it's the nature of creation for the stuff that wants to come into form to come into form. But the moment we start saying my about it and saying my painting or my art or my craft, which a lot of artists do, but it kind of gets in the way. It causes more misery than it causes, flow, because it's free gift. And for me, it's sort of a question of having just enough structure around self so that you can download and contain what's there without so much that you trap it and capture it and colonize it, which, puts an end on it. So it's a kind of funny dance, but there is a whole kind of wonderful tradition from the sacred arts of the Western mystical traditions that look at the give and take between this imaginal field, as they call it, and our own individual holographic parts of it. So you said about surrender, and I think that's it's a kind of tricky word that needs to be carefully interpreted in groups, because it's got a specialized use in the religious tradition. It doesn't mind rolling over and playing dead. yeah, you know, which is never a source of creativity. But it's an inner relaxation so that you don't go into brace position. You know, let it be, you know, and they say in the tradition that in the biblical tradition, that the world was created and redeemed by 3 let it be's. God at the beginning in Genesis saying, let it be, fiat. And then Mary at the Annunciation saying, let it be. And oops, we got a Savior. And then Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, let it be. And in the beautiful mythos of the Christian tradition, each of these fiats, as they're called, is not a rolling over and playing dead. It's the gateway to a kind of creativity that come to pass through this sort of supple yieldingness of a mind that's not intimidated and not totally cowed, but can again hold the shape. So that's what surrender means, understood in this kind of spiritual way that we work with. And without it, there can't be any creativity. That's what I had to learn, you know, with my 40 hours on a 5-minute sermon. That when I've got to do this because I got to look the best, and, you know, all you do is spend 15 minutes trying to figure out whether you want to say A or the, you know. So that's a little bit of where I go with the flow of this, and the interface between the spiritual and the creative.
Roy, do you want to add anything? And then we can maybe open up for questions.
Well, I think we're talking different levels in some respect here. When you're talking about Picasso and in the creative process, if you break it down, where he's done a lot of research and he's looked at the world and he's looked at paintings and so forth, and he's sensitized himself to what's happening within that field, actually, to some extent, he probably has gratitude. He probably has a lot of gratitude for painting and for the works of other people. And so in some ways, I see that as accepting what's there right now. So I think that's a very important part of the surrender that Cynthia is talking about. How can you surrender something that you don't have? Right? So there's something there. In other words, I don't mean having in terms of a possession, but in terms of an acceptance of reality, acceptance of yourself, acceptance of a particular field, and being sensitized to it. At that point, when a creative genius gets to that point and has the inner ability to let go, then new things come out. Naturally, very naturally come out. So to look at it another way, because I've investigated this in the brain, and basically a couple of things happen in creativity. Number one, if you're just solving very simple creative problems, the brain is business as usual. The brain has a tendency, as we focus our attention, it jumps around, you know, different parts lighting up and so forth. But when you start solving creativity at a deeper level, 2 things happen. Number one is the frequency in the brain goes from beta, which is around 13 hertz to 30 hertz cycles per second. It goes down to around 8 cycles per second, which is the same level of meditation for a lot of meditation, around 8 cycles per second. 8 cycles per second is the frequency of the brain when you're just getting out of bed in the morning. You just go up, you're sort of there, but you're not there. And a lot of creative ideas come from that space. So that's the first thing that happens. And then the second thing that happens with creativity, particularly when you're solving extremely complex problems, is the brain becomes coherent. So it means that 8 cycles per second is not just in a certain area of the brain. The entire brain is firing at the exact same frequency. Now that's an interesting thing to happen, because you realize all the associations, all your experience in your life, how you perceive the world and everything, it's all associated in the brain. If it's all firing at the same frequency, then that means there's some sort of witnessing going on. There's like the placenta that she's talking about. There's a witnessing going on. And then an unusual thing happens at the moment of creative insight. something even stranger happens. Is the frontal cortex, your executive function in the brain, and other parts of the brain, usually the left hemisphere, depends on the type of creativity, goes to something called subdelta. Delta goes from 1 hertz to 4 hertz. Delta is when you're in an extremely deep sleep state. So here you are, alert, awake, and most of your brain is going even lower than that. So this subdelta frequency, in terms of neuroscience, it's the level where very subtle or non-existent connections can be made. It allows the synapses in the brain to fire, for neurons to fire together that didn't fire together before. Right? So a number of unusual things happen. So in a way, how you perceive the world when you start getting into this state, 1, you're witnessing. Number 2, there's this tremendous coherence. Everything is connected together. And then 3rd, the subtlety or the silence of the mind allows you to see very, very clearly, you know, what's there and what will come up. So that's actually what we're talking about in terms of spirituality. Spirituality shows up in the brain. And in terms of surrender, surrender is kind of a funny thing in the brain. And there are very few neuroscientists that have looked at this. I've showed some of the results to people and they go, oh, we don't know what that is. But there's the front part of your brain, when you have what's called the theta rhythm. The theta rhythm is when we're in a dream state. You know, you have a theta rhythm. It generates a lot of different dreams in that. And that usually happens comes out of the thalamus, which is in the center part of the brain. But some people get theta in the frontal cortex of the brain. That happens under 2 conditions. 1, under sexual union, and number 2, solving complex problems. If you're solving very complex problems, theta will become coherent in the front part of the brain. So normally this frequency, or the power behind it, is very low, maybe 30 microvolts, or amplitude is very, very low. But during the surrender process, in the creative process, where this feeling just completely letting go, thy will, not mine, you know, from the spiritual perspective, the theta in the frontal cortex goes up from 3 to 700 microvolts. So the way I interpret that is the brain is given a problem that is almost impossible to solve. How does the ego relinquish itself? The most difficult thing for the ego to do is to relinquish itself. And that's a very, very powerful intention. And this kind of letting go is very, very unusual. So I think, this is my personal opinion, that under those conditions, then all of a sudden you get this tremendous amplitude in the front part of the brain. So there are a number of different things that are happening physiologically in the deeper creative process that I believe, it relates to what's happening. You get a very similar profile in meditation. Very, very similar profile in meditation. That's some of the work that I've done, is the relationship between the two. That you get this type of surrender, you get this coherence, you get the lower frequencies and so forth. So they're very, very much related. Sorry, I went on for a while.
Yeah.
For the science.
So interesting. Is there some questions that you'd like to ask either of them about? Any of
What role
the
does the
cre-
amygdala play?
The amygdala. Okay, the amygdala is part of the limbic system. The amygdala is emotion. All right? It's very complex, but the amygdala is tied in with our reward system. All right? And through meditation and through creativity, you know, these deeper levels of creativity, basically what happens is you're overriding the reward system, which is, this is one of the reasons why you get this, I believe why you get this high power theta, is to overcome the reward system is, you can't really do it yourself. You know, it has to come from, if you want to call it, I can't say it, it's an effort. It's an effort to let go. It's, I don't know how to describe it, but when the reward system is over, because the reward system is also a constraint. If you're trying to create
It's
something,
ego-driven, right?
yeah, if you're trying to create something and your reward system says, if I use the color red, I like the color red. I don't particularly like the color blue. You know, I feel better about red and less about the color blue. So the reward system can actually constrain or put boundaries on your creativity. And overcoming this reward system is one of the key focuses of many types of meditation.
Why do you think, maybe this is a little out there, but why do you think you feel hotter? You know, sometimes when you're kind of, you know, when your hypothalamus, I mean, how is that interfacing then with this increase, you know, that you feel warmer sometimes when you're meditating, or you have these sort of experiences, yeah, where you let go and for me personally, let God, you know, like what is?
And in the yoga tradition, I'm from the yoga tradition, though I spent a number of...
Did you say yogurt?
Yoga. Yeah, yoga tradition. I'm from the blueberry yogurt tradition.
My culture.
Sorry.
You like yogurt, obviously. It's called the fire of yoga. Yoga means union. That the closer you experience union, or the sense of connectedness inside of meditation, that it actually has a physiological response. It's the nervous system that increases this heat in the system. There's a lot of energy in the body. We have a lot more energy in our bodies than we can roughly guesstimate. And so that's just, you know, you won't evaporate, but you'll sometimes feel heat.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a monastery. I lived for a while in British Columbia, where they had a Tibetan Buddhist monastery up at the top of this mountain, up where it really got chilly in the winter, and they ran 3-year meditations where you don't sleep for those 3 years. You're given a little box that you sort of half sit in, and you meditate constantly. And they gave people the tiniest little shroud of a blanket was the only thing they got, because they say if you're a good meditator, you'll make your own heat. You won't heat. I never found myself expert enough.
Actually, there's a bit of a trick to that, because I know some of the Rinpoches that teach that.
You do, yeah.
And the ones that, you know, put the blankets, the wet blankets in sub-zero weather and so forth. They actually train themselves. They train themselves to do that. And they will go under cold waterfalls and things like that to build up the resistance to be able to generate the heat. So it takes time. It's not sit and meditate and suddenly I can dry blankets at 20 below zero. You'll probably catch a cold.
I was wondering about, we've talked about the creative impulse versus the creative process, and the speed at which a creative thing might come. You know, and Roy, we spoke the other day about the power of change quickly versus change slowly. I wonder if you could just talk about that. I mean, I'm not sure what the question is, except to say, I guess is we talk about creativity as an impulse. Can creativity come slowly, and it can it be just as valid, let's say, as that sort of an insight, an instant insight?
Well, there are two basic problem-solving styles. One problem-solving style is the intuitive style. Gut feeling, boom, there it is. You know, there's the idea. And there are quite a number of people that process information that way. And there are others that process it in little increments, little explosions. You know, they have a little explosion, then they evaluate, they think about it, you know, how it fits, and then another little explosion, and they go step by step. This is one thing that we haven't talked about here, is in the creative process, back to Picasso again, one of the reasons why Picasso would do research and so forth related to painting is he has an agenda, right? And a lot of people that are creative have an agenda. And that agenda is to offer value, either to themselves, that's a reward system, or to the world. So in order to have value for the world in a way that other people will accept it more easily, is you have to know what they value, and then find some way to take that creative impulse, or those little creative impulses, and make them work. Whereas what Cynthia is talking about is the value is inherent spontaneously in the process itself, that you don't have to worry about, does this have value to anybody or doesn't have value to anybody. If it's coming from deep down inside, there's a reason, raison d'etre, there's a reason for it somewhere, for you, for your own spiritual or your personal development, or potentially for other people as well. But yes, it can be very quick, and yes, it can be very slow. I mean, if you look at the changes in the meditation process that people experience, the transformation doesn't happen all at once. I'm sitting there, 2 seconds later, I'm enlightened. I'm one with God. Wonderful if that would happen to everyone, but usually it's a process. Step-by-step process. We have insights, we develop a little bit further, things come up, there's a purification inside, and step by step we get to where we need to be. Did I answer your question? Okay.
I'm wondering if we've got a whole bunch of different kind of images of what creativity is going around the room. We've been using the term as if everybody's on the same page about what creativity is. But I'm hearing at least two different ways of, one of it is, thing that I'm hearing is creativity as we experience it via the arts, being somebody who produces a kind of work of art that people say, oh, that's amazing, or imaginative, or, whether it's a poem, what makes the difference between, a T.S. Eliot and me, that somebody, so we often use it to really talk about solutions that have got this extraordinary kind of elegance and out of nowhere, and science, the coming up with the amazing new theorem or something like that. Is there another kind of creativity that doesn't involve so much, a finished product that you sign your name to, but a way of being present in social engagement, in mediation and negotiation, at cocktail parties, as it were, that allows simply a way that energy moves between people that are creating, that are open, so that nobody owns the process, but that something happens that's amazing to all.
More than a few times today, and for many years I've used the metaphor of a conversation, with my students, as I invite them into the study of literature or something like that. There's what does it take to participate in a conversation? You got to know the vocabulary in some cases. You got to know what's been said before you entered. You've got to have some sensitivity to the people involved in the process, and so it becomes what you just said. I mean, for me, it's that idea of the conversation. I may have had my insights. How then do I go through a process of trying to communicate those, so that it can add something to the conversation? And how am I open to other people's contributions, maybe further shaping what I've come up with? It may not. In the end, what I get in that intuitive flash is precious. But now, what do I do with it? I either enter the conversation and allow it again to let it go, to see where it may end up, in good company, one hopes. I don't know. You were looking for a metaphor. That's the one that comes to me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, we all kind of have a sense that this thing, whatever it is, whether it's a personal gift or of underlying capacity for a higher synergy, that it's something that we, that's of extraordinary value. Or else we wouldn't be spending time gathering to ponder it. Yeah. So what do you mean by creativity, Roy? How do you?
Well, I mean, I've looked at, because I've done research in creativity, I've had to see what other people think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of divide it into problem solving, creative expression, which can be in a conversation or a dancer up on stage or an orator or whatever, and creative problem finding. So this is the science of it. But because I've been involved in meditation for many years, the way I look at creativity is fundamentally an intention. Fundamentally, it's an intention. And this intention is to, or allows, this intention allows transcendence, allows the transcendence of boundaries, and it also allows for integration. And it can, this intention can be very, very simple things, having a conversation with someone, and you want to express something, or you feel the impulse to express something to someone else. In order to do that, you have to transcend where you were 2 seconds ago to do that. And at the same time, when you're communicating with another person, it's pulling together. It's the feedback, the feed forward that allows people to come together, to have some sort of mutual experience. And so it's a constant interplay of transcendence and integration through the power of intention. And like I said, intention, the most powerful intention that we can possibly ever have as a human being is unconditional love. I haven't mentioned that in the conversation, but it's the most, if you want to call it, difficult intention to have for ourselves, for everyone and everything around us. That's why, I gave the TEDx talk about gratitude. If you look at gratitude at a deeper level, it's appreciation. What's appreciation at a deeper level? It's the feeling of connectedness. What is connectedness at a deeper level? It's love. So ultimately it comes down to that. But of course I'm not going to say that in a science journal.
Just
Oops, naughty. Already gratitude is the heart of creativity. I know there are a lot of psychologists in the States that are going like this, although they know that positive emotions are associated with creativity. That's about as far as they'll go.
I say that I think that's 100% correct. And when I saw that talk you did, yeah, of course, and we've watched it so many times that if you can just, in some ways, ask people, even as an act of imagination, to reverse the glass half empty to half full, and to look at the same situation with that something opens up, and that there's a whole new way of being present to it that allows more space for something to enter.
Some years ago, driving, listening to NPR, and Marty and I've talked about this.
Yeah.
I've tried to find it since then, and I haven't. Maybe you could help. Someone was on there explaining that it's impossible to feel anxiety and fear and gratitude simultaneously, that there's this kind of binary switch in the brain. If you're feeling gratitude, that other stuff basically recedes into the background. Whereas, again, it works the other way too. If you're anxious, it's hard to feel at all open to even the good things. But it was based on some brain research this fellow was doing, and I didn't catch his name. Haven't ever found that, in print since. But I mean, it sounds like it makes sense, sort of what you were just saying.
Yeah, non-constricted.
Yeah. But that doesn't ring a bell as far. Oh yes, that person said that.
Mr. Davidson, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I sort of like to, ask the devil's advocate's question in the circle. That if there's a sort of general agreement that creativity flows better in conditions where there's non-constriction, how does that come back into how you set up classroom situations? How do you set up the educational systems that mentor children towards competence in the world without engendering constriction?
Well, actually, one of the things that actually stimulates creativity is constriction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freedom within form.
Because,
Freedom within, yeah.
because when you experience constriction, a lot of people want freedom. They don't want to be constrained. It feels uncomfortable, and it motivates them, drives them to find out, why am I constrained? And so constriction, I don't think is, it's all part and parcel of life, but constriction is actually a judgment.
Yeah.
It's a judgment that we make. I'm constrained, I'm not constrained, but the fact that we feel constrained, whether it's a reality or not a reality, motivates us. And sometimes the reward system, I said, it's cool to override the reward system, but how do you override the reward system? Step by step. In other words, greater levels of, if you want to call it joy, you know, greater and greater levels of joy, greater and greater levels of satisfaction. That's not enough, and go how high, you know, just keep going. And I think in spirituality, modeling God, modeling the bliss, you know, and so forth, the love of God is about the shortest route you can take to get there.
But it is sort of interesting that, you know, freedom within the form. You know, why is the sonnet still a pretty fertile place where some people go? It's, in one sense, it's extremely constrained, you know, or paint. You got two dimensions. What are you going to do? How are you going to play with that? Make something appear.
Yeah.
So those are, but it's a playfulness. You know, those are constrictions we accept as not final.
Yeah. Yeah, the outer constriction, and you know, I was talking more about the inner constriction that shuts down creativity. The outer constriction increases it tremendously because that presents the form in which you're playing.
I'm wondering if how would it be if we looked at some of the other things that we see as you know, bulletproof constrictions or restrictions in that same playfulness. Well, this is what's happening now, and I can be creative within this context. But it's just a context, and there's really a larger sea in which this may be only a, I don't know.
What do you feel the inner constrictions are? What are the deepest inner constrictions that human beings have that could block this type of creativity or this type of experience?
Fear.
Huh? Fear? Okay. What is fear?
It's constriction. It is anxiety. It is, help me out here.
Well, there's some kind of judgment that's there that you're rallying, that you're pushing against if you're afraid.
Threat.
I mean, like for me, when I'm afraid, it's usually because I'm afraid to be wrong. You know, whatever I view as wrong, and that's of course based on some judgment.
Fear of something's going to be lost, something can be taken away.
Okay. Lost, gain.
Lost gain. I was so glad you brought this up because this whole, when you say the outer constrictions, I'm thinking time. This is the big one I see. And I bring this up because some of us experience the Mind Up curriculum. And we've had some discussion around it about why would, Mind Up is a curriculum where you really infuse into your curriculum aspects of core practice of breathing, and of a mindfulness about being more aware of your environment, which when I talk to my kids about it, I say, you guys, you're the we're taking you back to where you are. Yeah. We're taking you back to where, you know, from where we have taken you. We're taking you back to from where you've come because we've taken you away from. And that is noticing the little things, the creative aspects of things. But anyway, when you're this curriculum is to say that, you know, you have to have training for it. So people have to be trained. That will take time to bring in a little bit of time, a few minutes a day for breathing, a few minutes a day, or at some point throughout the curriculum of sensitization, to smells, to touch, to sounds, to all those kinds of things. More knowledge about the human brain, for children even. So at this level, this is how much you expose them to, at this level, this is how much. And the whole thing, and so the thing that's come back to us is it will never work because of the time that it will take out of the curriculum. But it doesn't take time out of the curriculum, but so it's a way of seeing it, that it's not taking time out of the curriculum, it's infusing into the curriculum But it is a shared process. It has to be, everybody's got to be on board about it. So it's a buy-in for it to happen. So that's what I'm thinking, time is what I was thinking when you said that. It's the time afraid someone's going to take something from my curriculum. Someone's going to take something away from my time.
Another constriction, yeah.
Yeah.
And sadly, we're constrained by the time.
Speaking of which.
A couple things that are just quite fascinating to me. The first thing is what you said, Cynthia, about the mundi imagination or whatever.
Originalis, yeah.
Wow, that you know. Oh, hi, Amy. Come on in.
Can I join?
Oh, please do.
Sure. We've just downsized and rebooted.
Yeah. So it's creativity and spiritual life, as we're talking about.
Yes.
This is just part 2 here. So,
Okay.
and so we're just sharing what we thought of part 1 in a sense. So, so the first thing is just that there's a field of creativity out there that we just need to access. That's so different than I think the image of creativity that I was raised with was just like I had to find it deep within, but I feel empty. I don't think I'm that creative. I'm not artsy. I don't like to get up and dance on the tables in general. You know, I'm not that creative. Push your boundaries.
Get out of your comfort zone.
That's right. But anyway, that idea of tapping into all these energy fields or creative energy fields. And the second thing of what you said, it gets back to the TED Talk, Roy, that you did. It's just that when you keep going deep into all these things, it's gratitude, it's love. And I think, wow, I mean, a school grounded in the Christian faith that we say that we are, I mean, this should be like our forte. This should be like what we're best at. I mean, the Christian tradition is it's all about love. I mean, it's right in our text. So I'd really like to see how creativity emerges out of that groundedness in love. I think that would be I think it's a very attractive and tangible vision. And I think both of you are giving us pointers on about how to do that. And it has to do with surrender and somehow letting go, right? As we talked about yesterday. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. What do you think about?
When I think about creativity, sometimes I think like what is block? You know, the term blocked it often comes up. Like, you know, I can't quite get that, or I'm feeling blocked. I can't come up with the product or the problem, solution, whatever. And actually, it seems like, you know, what you both are saying kind of supports that in a way, in that if there's a constriction or there is the energy isn't flowing, then creativity is more difficult. And then if there is a connectedness happening and all that, then creativity can come about. So it seems a new way for me to think about it in a way that was familiar to me.
And if I can just add to just what you said, Wendy, just makes me wonder, I mean, are we working with, is the paradigm of the individual being creative, or are we talking about communities being creative? And I wonder if, you know, I wanted to ask Kevin while I was here, but maybe someone else can speak to it. When we've said that HKS wants to be a place known for creativity, resilience, and collaboration, when we talk about creativity, are we mostly thinking about the individual being creative, or are we talking about us as a collective community being creative? That seems like that's part of that constriction, perhaps, if we're just saying we want our individuals, and that's how we're going to measure creativity, is how many creative individuals we have. That's different than a creative community. So, anything you would add, or you can pass?
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, just what you were saying. I was just thinking about developmentally with young children. I mean, you know, talking about collective community. You know, just thinking about how you do work with young children on the whole thing of creativity. If it is a collective idea, especially, you know, when you're working with 5- and 6-year-olds and they're very much in that sort of egocentric, you know, place. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it was just came to mind.
All right. Anything to add?
I've got a couple thoughts, and I'm not sure if they go together, but one is a conversation that we had on the bus yesterday about, you know, how journaling is, you know, is supposed to be about letting go, and we talked about how, you know, in order for you to really let go, you have to almost be willing to burn the pages after you journal in them, you know, so you can let go of that ego. And along with that was the idea about creativity. A friend of mine who's an artist once said, you know, she said, you know, ideas are an artist's currency. And, you know, so sometimes really speaking to how you can feel territorial about them. And the idea that if you're going to be creative in a community, you almost have to be willing to burn that currency or throw it up in the air, you know, and just say, it's not my money anymore. It's not my, you know, it's not my idea. And that's a hard place to come individually, but especially with other people, because you're always afraid someone's going to take your idea, you know, and then they're going to name it as their idea. And that's that trust and community that you have to develop in order to be willing to be creative together, I think. That takes time. Oh, I don't know, those are just some thoughts I've had putting together from what you said.
Amy, I know you just got here. Do you have anything to add, or you want?
I'll pass.
Okay. All right. Craig, maybe you could just introduce yourself, because you just walked in.
I did.
So, yeah.
Yes, I'm Craig from Chinese International School, and I look after the International Baccalaureate Diploma program there as head of academic, and teach a subject called Theory of Knowledge, which in its new iteration, commencing in August this year, includes 2 new areas of knowledge. One is indigenous systems of knowledge, and the other is religious systems of knowledge, which previously had never been part of what was considered simply as mathematics, natural and human sciences, history, the arts, and ethics. And now there are 2 other ways.
Wow.
And also, interestingly,
it's a revolution in itself.
Yeah, I know.
Well, it's arisen in part from many years of discussion with the International Baccalaureate. The other is that ways of knowing. We also consider, as we're looking at these areas of knowledge, we consider ways of knowing. And traditionally, certainly in the last 7 years or so, it's looked at sense perception, language, reason, and emotion. What is now being added is intuition, memory, faith, and another one that escapes me at the moment, that are to be considered as you discuss this whole question. That's what I play around with in my mind. I'm intrigued by the conversation about creativity, because it's a word that's always used. And it seemed to me that I thought, in listening to the conversation and picking up on part of the conversation, which I only got here sort of at the second half of part 1, was that I wondered, so creativity, it seems you were saying, happens not in the cognitive realm, but in some other realm, not with engagement of my thinking, and yet creativity has intention, but can it be intentional? And that can I purpose with my mind, I will be creative? Or is it some other means? Because I thought you were saying, actually, Craig, you're most creative when you're asleep, right? When you were describing the brain and the state of the brain and how it's functioning. Perhaps if I'm in a deep state of meditation also I may, but I do know that when I am asleep and I dream, I think they're pretty creative. You know, my last dream had an octopus in it. And I said, where did that octopus come from? I just throw in kind of an initial question, was that when I know Robert Sternberg, right, he talks about a triarchic view of intelligence, and he says there's analytical intelligence, there's a practical intelligence, and then his third is creative intelligence. So he does talk about this as an intelligence itself, in how he would describe it. He links this to a whole realm of work that he's doing about the common good, and uses the word wisdom as part of the literature that's informing his discussion about these intelligences. But I guess I should simplify and just say, well, that was what my question was coming in. Is it a suggestion that to be creative, we have to move to somewhere else other than cognitive engagement? Is it an affective or social engagement in some way that we have to craft within a school and within a classroom that actually draws out creativity?
Just quickly, on the cognitive side, the thinking part of creativity, normally what happens if people have an insight, that insight may not be very clear. In other words, they have a deep down sensation that there's something very, very important in this, but they're not quite sure exactly what it is. Then the cognitive part of the brain, and a lot of people that create, starts to look at it, starts to make relationships between that and their experience and their knowledge and so forth to create value for themselves or for other people. This is a typical approach, you know, within creativity. But the actual impetus for the insight, as I was saying before, is this intention, this surrender that happens very, very naturally. And I teach, I have some techniques that allows kids to get into this state very, very quickly. And I'll have students that within 7 minutes of doing an exercise can come up with creative ideas. And these are kids coming out of typical Chinese schools where it's all memorization. And they'll come up with insights that not only stun them, but stun the teachers. And out of a class of maybe 100 students, you're looking at between 85 to 90% hit rate of shock value in terms of creativity. And it's all getting, and it's bypassing a lot of the, if you want to call it, a lot of the constraints. And sometimes when the kids are coming up with these ideas, they have something, they don't quite know what they have yet. And because I don't give them enough time, they're doing this whole thing in 7 minutes. Maximum 15 minutes presentation. They'll get up in front of the room and, well, this is what came up, and the rest of the students are going. And the teachers are going like that. It's, in other words, the power is in every single person, every single one of us. This creative blockage that I experience creative blockage. I never considered myself a very creative person when I was younger. I was one of these scientists, number crunching, you know, very efficient, can solve problems, but give me a creative problem, you know, pretty much a slightly better than standard result. But when I started to get engaged in meditation and that, it was just, a lot of it was just wiped out. The block. I've never had a creative blockage, ever. Since 1991, actually a little bit earlier than that. And it doesn't matter how difficult the problem is, just because it's not coming from Roy. The solutions don't come from Roy. Roy is actually, if anything, I got to watch out for him. He gets in the way.
So I'm also intrigued about the relationship between image, following on that, between image and word and creativity. In that, I wonder if that, you said insights, right? These kids have insights, so insights equals creativity in this case with these kids. And those insights, are they first there as images to them, to which they then come and put words to it in order to convey this to somebody else and say, see?
Depends on the student. Some students have images. Other students come up immediately with words. Some students just come up with unusual feelings that relate to the particular problem. It's very, very different, and sometimes there's a mixture. I guess it's the way that it comes up is for each person, it's in the realm that they're probably most comfortable with in expressing themselves. That's a guess.
Gabriel, do you want to add anything? Something you're thinking about?
A mix of you know, what you were saying about creating value is what triggers creativity, or one goal of that you know the society values what you're creating, and also you know letting it go. So, but isn't society with the current currency stopping, or is just that a reward that maybe isn't not the one that will trigger creativity the most for the benefit of the whole society? I mean, we could be traveling as the speed of light already if we hadn't stopped it with with the egoistic feeling of, well, I need, or if I don't give this, or somebody will take advantage of it. So
that's a very, very good question, and it's the thing that I've been running against. This is the wall, within the education system. It's the wall that I've been running against. And there was research that was done in the United States. I forgot whether it was Carnegie Mellon or somewhere on the East Coast. What they discovered is that there's a tremendous amount of resistance against creativity. And the people resist creativity, number one, and the ones that resist creativity don't really have an understanding or feeling for creativity. And this resistance comes from fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of facing things that they're uncomfortable with, or that rock the system, and so forth. So within the education, in other words, politicians and even heads of school, will say creativity is one of our foremost values, but it's just talk. It's all air. I went to the dean. I don't know if he's still dean. Well, anyway, the dean of academics at the Polytechnic University before I left, because I've retired. They retire you after you're 60 years old.
That's creative, right?
Yeah. So anyway, so I went to him and had a discussion about creativity. So he asked me a number of questions, and he says, creativity is not the realm of a university. I said, oh, what's the realm of the, professional knowledge and skills. This is what we do here, is we're about training people in professional knowledge and skills. And I said, well, isn't creativity like a core strategic value of the Polytechnic University? And he says, yes, it is. And I said, well, what are you doing about that? Oh, we have a solution. We have competitions. We have competitions. A few kids, go into these competitions. Someone wins the competition. We promote it. We promote it in the press. We promote it around, Hong Kong. We're supporting creativity. And then I said to him, I said, I said, do you know what an IQ curve looks like? He's an engineer. I said, yeah. An IQ curve is a bell curve. I said, do you know what the creativity curve looks like in terms of creative output? He said, no, I don't know what that looks like. It's a skewed curve. It goes like this. This part is not creative. Way down here is creative. And he goes, well, so what? I said, if the greater part of the population is in this part of the curve, and the real creative people are out here in the end, who's managing the creative people? People who are not creative, or have no concept of creativity. So no wonder there's resistance. I said the only way you're going to improve, if you're looking for value type creativity to society and so forth, make money, get famous, and all these type of approaches to creativity, then basically you have to get this part of the curve more tuned into what it's all about. And my approach to this is meditation. I mean, all the other stuff is there, but I kind of slip through the back door with meditation, because I know that people are interested in creativity, but there's an issue within the school system with meditation, and a lot of school systems, because of spiritual connotations and so forth. So I found basically a scientifically based way to achieve that, to achieve the higher levels of creativity, but it's doing a lot more. Because when people meditate, they do a lot more. So that's bit by bit getting inroads. But there's a tremendous amount of resistance, even in a design school. And they're all supposed to be creative, you know, and their lifeblood is creativity. It's just, you know, amazing. So yes, society, schools, politics, governments, and so forth. The China government is afraid of creativity. They're afraid of creativity that it's going to spill into the political arena. They don't want to deal with that. But at the same time, you know, they're coming up with initiatives to improve creativity in schools. You know what their initiative is? Out of Shanghai, they've selected 100 top schools in China. They're creating a creativity textbook, and it's part of an elective, right? And they're going to put this out to all these different schools, and the children have the choice of taking the creativity elective. And what is the creativity elective? Edward de Bono, mind mapping, you know, Tinker Toys, all this type of stuff. You know. And they're trying to, you know, to control it, find some way to control it within, you know, what they can manage. So I think meditation is a great way, because I think ultimately meditation is probably one of the only ways to get in touch with the type of creativity that we've been talking about here. And that is intimately tied with spirituality. My focus on it is, I take it strictly from a scientific, neuropsychological point of view. Whatever I do is based in scriptures and all that sort of thing, but I don't relay that information to people.
Can I ask you your 7 minutes with the kids?
The 7 minutes? I have a program. It's a 3-hour program. It's called Creative Contemplation. And what I do is, in the context of a meditative state, or in a field, you can say you're sort of tilling the soil, that I show them how to drop a seed in the soil. And the seed is the particular problem, the question they have, and so forth. So I teach them how to, first of all, get into that state, how to create a very powerful intention through letting go and to drop it in. But I have one exercise called the Letting Go Challenge that shocks most of the students. And this is probably kind of where they get into it, is I ask them, you can try this if you have the nerve to do it, but I ask them to write down on a piece of paper the 3 things, people, whatever, that are the greatest treasures in their lives. So many write down my mother, my father, you know, my intelligence. They'll write down things that they find is most precious. And then I'll say to them, what happens from here on is totally voluntary. You do not have to do this. Do not allow peer pressure or anything to force you into doing this. If you want to do it, then do it. And they kind of went, what's that? And I said, I'm creating a fire outside. I want you to take your little piece of paper and throw it in the fire with the intention that you're completely letting go those treasures, just offering them to the highest principle that you know. And we're in a Chinese community here, so you get burn my mother, burn my father. You got to be kidding me. So there's a tremendous amount of resistance. But some of them will go and they'll give it a go. And those that go to give it a go, they're one thing. The ones that are sitting there, I said, okay, reflect on why you felt that you couldn't do that. So anyway, the ones that come back that had done it, we asked them, well, what did you feel? And they said, well, many of them say, well, I felt fear, I felt trepidation, to start this. But when I did it, all of a sudden I felt light. I felt free. I felt wonderful. I felt bliss. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I felt some deeper joy from this strange experiment.
Including burning your mother?
Yes. Actually, my daughter was in one of those sessions. Now, my daughter was in one of those sessions, and when she heard what I asked her to do, she looked at me. And she knows I don't do anything unless there's got to be a reason behind it. So she went up and did it. And then in the class, she says, "Dad, I want to let you know I burned you."
And how did it feel?
And how did it feel,
So you have a ritually, they put a piece of paper, it's some kind of...
Yeah, they burn it. You have to go outside for that. It's even illegal on the Polytechnic University, but I found a way around it. So anyway, so then the ones that who didn't do it, ask them, what are your reasons? So they give reasons. Well, if I let go of the most precious things in my life, then who am I? What am I? Or someone say, well, this is so bad luck. You're wishing bad luck on your parents and your friends and so forth. Culturally, this is incorrect, and so forth. So you get these two different points of view, and then I tell them a story. And the story is about, I don't know if I should tell the story. Take a couple of minutes. You guys want to hear a funny story? You can use this with the kids. Once upon a time, there was a swordsman, and this swordsman was undefeated in battle. He'd never lost a battle, never lost a duel, never even got scratched. And he was an older man at the time, and he had a disciple. And this young disciple asked the master, he says, Master, how come throughout your entire life you've had so many battles and duels and that, and you've never lost? How is that even possible? And he says, oh, I learned that from a friend of mine who's a merchant. This was what? From a merchant. And he says, well, one time when I was younger, I was walking with this merchant in a town, and the merchant noticed there was an antique shop over on the left side of the street. And in the antique shop was this beautiful cup and saucer, antique cup and saucer, that matched a cup and saucer that was broken in his set. So he wanted to look at replacing it. So he goes into the antique shop, and he asked the owner, how much for this cup and saucer? And the owner said, 1,000 Hong Kong dollars. 1,000 Hong Kong dollars. He says, no, I'll give you 500. No, it's 1,000 Hong Kong dollars. I'm sorry, all I'm going to pay is 500. So they go haggling back and forth. And then the merchant says to the swordsman, okay, let's go. They walk out the door about 10 steps, and the owner of the shop comes right in. Okay, I'll give it to you for 500 Hong Kong dollars. So they go back in the shop. As they're wrapping it up, the swordsman's wandering around looking at the shop, and he notices this beautiful antique sword. Wow. So he asks the shop owner, how much for the sword? 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. No, I can only give you 5,000. 10,000, I'm sorry, I'm not going to move. 5,000 it is, that's it. And then, so they leave together. They go 10 feet, and the shop owner doesn't come out. They go down to the end of the road, and the shop owner still hasn't run out and given it to him for his price. So he goes to his friend, he says, how is that possible? I did exactly what you did. You got it for your price, I didn't get it for my price. So the merchant said to him, he says, oh. He said, did you want the sword? Of course I wanted the sword. He said, that's your problem. He said, because the shop owner could smell that you really wanted the sword. So therefore he knows that you'll come back 3 days later or 2 weeks later and you're going to buy it at his price. He said, well, didn't you want the cup? He said, of course I wanted the cup and saucer. But when he didn't give it to me for my price, it was gone. I just let it go. And the guy sensed that if he didn't do the sale right then and there, he wasn't going to do a sale at all. So the swordsman says to his friends, well, how do you manage to do that? How can you want something and then let it go like that? He says, oh, I have a practice. He says, I own many warehouses and many ships, and I have a large family and so forth, many, many possessions. He says, I have a practice that every night before I go to sleep, I burn all my warehouses. I burn all of my possessions. He says, I even ritually burn my family. I don't see them suffering and all this sort of thing. I just consume in this fire everything that I own or am attached to. And he says, when I get up in the morning, I'm a poor man. I don't even have $1 in my pocket. When I get up in the morning, my family is completely new to me. I've never seen them before. They're beautiful, strange, wonderful people. I have no constraints on them whatsoever. And so I'm able to be a good businessman. I'm able to be a good family member, and so forth. So the swordsman told his disciple, he says, I followed this technique, but I said I went one step further than the merchant. I also consumed myself in the fire. And because I consume myself in the fire, every day I have absolutely zero fear of death. And when I go into a battle, other people have even one hair of a fear of death or doubt, right? They're going to lose. They're going to lose because I've given up everything. And so I tell the students, I said, those of you that didn't want to burn the paper, what you're actually burning with the paper is you're burning your understanding of your mother, your understanding of your father, your constraints on the world around you, your constraints and your understanding of your knowledge, your intelligence, your creativity, whatever it is. This is what you're burning. You can never destroy your mother. You don't even know who your mother is. You know, you can never destroy anything, any of the treasures in life. The only thing you can destroy is your perception, how you look at things in your life. And so this is a letting go challenge, and they start to go, oh, okay, I can do that. I can do that. In other words, they all realize that they can do that to some extent. But it's a perception, it's a state of mind, putting yourself in a different state of mind.